This Amazon US lighting seller once had an advertising ACOS as high as 78.8%. What did they do to bring it down to 18.2%? The hardest part was not simply deciding whether the ads should keep running. When sales declined, the real challenge was determining whether the advertising had stopped working or whether a best-selling child SKU had simply gone out of stock. The story begins in May 2025. This seller operates a lighting business on Amazon US, with more than 100 ASINs under management. Its parent-child variation structure is complex, including both established bestsellers with steady sales and new products being tested over time. Before adopting DeepBI, the store relied heavily on manual advertising management. Competition in the lighting category was intense, and cost per click was relatively high. At one point, the AOC as the seller's original advertising campaigns reached 78.8%. The operations team simply did not have enough capacity to review search terms every day while continuously adjusting bids and budgets across different ASINs. Sometimes bids would be cut one day, only to be raised again the next. If they stopped advertising, the seller worried that orders would decline. If they kept spending, they worried that the budget would be consumed by low-efficiency traffic. The core dilemma was straightforward. They could not afford to turn advertising off. But they were also afraid to scale it further. Inventory made the situation even more complicated. Lighting products typically have relatively long replenishment lead times, and several core SKUs were at risk of going out of stock. If advertising suddenly scaled traffic while the product was unavailable, budget could be wasted during a period when there was no inventory to convert that demand into sales. So when the seller started using DeepBI for advertising management in May 2025, the goal was not simply to generate more impressions. They cared about three things. First, bring ACOS under control. Second, prevent ad-attributed sales from collapsing. And third, determine which ASINs were actually worth further investment. After taking over, DeepBI did not immediately push for higher volume. The first step was to take control of the core advertising campaigns and reassess the existing campaign structure. Which campaigns were consistently spending without generating conversions? Which search terms had accumulated significant spend without being adjusted effectively over time? Which ASIN, SES, or search terms already had a conversion history but were not receiving enough budget? Based on these signals, DeepBI reduced bids and budgets for inefficient targets. For targets with proven conversion history, it preserved enough budget to continue testing and validation. The priority at this stage was to recover the budget being lost to obvious structural inefficiencies. In May 2025, sales generated by DeepBI managed advertising on Amazon US reached $4,883, with an ACOS of 27.8%. This was not the result of a one-time push for volume. More importantly, it established a new baseline. Compared with the 78.8% ACOS of the seller's previous advertising setup, efficiency had returned to a level where further scaling could realistically be considered. Only then did the next question emerge. Once ACOS was under control, could the business scale? From June through October 2025, DeepBI managed advertising on Amazon US entered a gradual scaling phase. Monthly ad-attributed sales increased from $15,840 to $73,071.70. During the same period, DeepBI managed ACOS remained at approximately 20% to 26%. By October 2025, total monthly store sales had reached approximately $128,832.60. Not every ASIN line was managed with the same advertising strategy during this period. Targets with more stable performance and established conversion history received additional budget for further observation and scaling. Targets with unstable performance, high spend, and limited conversions were tightened. DeepBI's role was to evaluate campaign, search term, and ASIN-level conversion performance together. Based on that combined data, the system could determine which targets deserved further exploration and which needed reduced exposure. By 2026, the seller's mindset had begun to change. On March 20th, after confirming that ACOS remained within the expected range and inventory levels were relatively healthy, the client proactively requested that the advertising budget be doubled. On March 26th, the client asked to increase the budget for a specific SKU and create an additional automatic advertising campaign. These actions reflected a clear shift in priorities. The seller was no longer asking only, will advertising continue wasting money? Instead, they were beginning to use ACOS, inventory levels, and ASIN performance to decide which products could support further scaling. But scaling did not mean the store would continue growing in a straight line. In early April 2026, several best-selling child SKUs went out of stock. ACOS began to fluctuate. Budgets were tightened and overall store sales experienced a temporary decline. At that point, the seller began to suspect that the advertising strategy had stopped working. DeepBI quickly identified the issue and clarified that the primary reason for the recent sales decline was that several best-selling child SKUs had gone out of stock, not that the advertising itself had become ineffective. Later, during discussions about the annual renewal plan on May 22, 2026, the client pointed out that replenishment lead times in the lighting category could be as long as 50 to 60 days. The seller also raised two specific concerns. Would child SKUs that were out of stock or approaching a risky inventory level continue wasting advertising budget? Once inventory was healthy again, would products with remaining growth potential automatically receive more budget? DeepBI is designed as an adaptive system. When it detects that the inventory level of a child SKU has fallen below a defined safety threshold, It proactively controls budget allocation and shifts traffic toward products with sufficient inventory, without waiting for the client to intervene. Once inventory is replenished, the system can also identify the renewed scaling opportunity and reallocate budget toward SKUs that have already demonstrated effective performance. The results in June 2026 provided another validation after the inventory fluctuations. DeepBI managed advertising sales on Amazon US reached $62,354. Total store sales reached $120,760.70. DeepBI managed advertising ACOS fell to 18.2%. At the same time, DeepBI managed campaigns generated nearly all of the store's advertising attributed sales. Spend and sales generated by the seller's original manually managed advertising campaigns had dropped to very low levels. This does not mean that every ASIN performed well at every stage. Stockouts and the 50 to 60-day replenishment cycle did place real constraints on the pace of advertising, but once inventory recovered, ad attributed sales returned to a high level while ACOS declined even further. This helped the seller recognize something important. A temporary drop in sales does not necessarily mean advertising performance has failed. Sometimes a best-selling child SKU is simply out of stock. Looking back over this period of more than a year, the seller initially saw the problem as a binary choice. Either lower ACOs and accept slower sales growth, or scale advertising and take on the risk of losing money. Over time, that single dilemma was broken down into several distinct stages. During the activation stage, the priority was to address the high ATOs and eliminate clearly inefficient ad spend. During the scaling stage, the seller tested sales elasticity while keeping ACOs within approximately 20% to 26%. During periods of inventory volatility, the first question became whether inventory could support continued demand. Once inventory recovered, the business could then reconsider whether budget should be increased again. So the question of whether advertising can be scaled cannot be answered by looking at a single month's ACOs alone. Advertising performance. Differences between ASINs and inventory cycles all need to be evaluated together as part of the same business decision. Let DeepBI's AI power your Amazon ads 24/7, improve conversion, reduce wasted ad spend, and grow organic sales. Send one ASIN for a free listing audit.